suspended from the Schedule 2 of the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. And I'll give you a brief history how that happened. A gentleman named Terry Parker has a legal exemption to possess marijuana and to cultivate marijuana in Ontario and Toronto. He was constantly being hassled and charged by the police, who didn't seem to acknowledge or respect his exemption. He eventually got to the Ontario Court of Appeal, which is the second highest judicial body in Canada, just below the Supreme Court of Canada, which is of course the highest body. And what happens is the Ontario Court of Appeal said this can't go on. We can't have these medical marijuana people with exemptions, yet they're constantly being harassed. So the Ontario Court of Appeal on July 30th, 2000, gee, that's over 3 years ago now, on July 31st, year 2000, they said that Parliament had 365 days to bring in a new legislation passed by Parliament that clearly provided marijuana and the legal access and the legal ability for people to have medical marijuana. They gave the government 365 days, and the government did not appeal that decision. And that's very important, because the Ontario Court of Appeal is the second highest body in the land, as I've said. They agreed with the decision. They said, we will rewrite a new law, we will pass it through Parliament, and we will conform to the request of the Ontario Court of Appeal. But in fact, things went along, and they did not, in fact, do that. There's some brochures and magazines here for you folks, if you want to come by and grab some there. They didn't obey the court order, and 365 days went by, and on July 31st, 2001, a full year later, Parliament had failed to even consider, let alone pass, any new laws regarding medical marijuana. At that point, marijuana was suspended from Schedule 2. The Court of Appeal had told the government, if you don't bring in a new law by July 31st, 2001, then cannabis will be taken out of the Schedule 2 of the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. And at that point in time, cannabis possession will be not an offense known unto law in Canada. Well, when that happened, on August 1st, 2001, I started telling everybody on Pot TV and in our magazine, anybody who'd listen, hey, marijuana's legal. Couldn't get a single person or newspaper to even pay attention to the fact that I clearly understood the law now as to having suspended cannabis from the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. Well, a whole year and a half goes by, and a lawyer, a friend of mine, Brian McAllister in Windsor, Ontario, goes before a judge and says, Your Honor, my client's charged with possession of marijuana, but in fact there is no marijuana law. It was suspended from the Schedule of Controlled Drugs and Substances Act on July 31st, 2001. A Judge Phillips of the Windsor Provincial Court looked at it and says, you're right. There is no marijuana law, and so everyone in this Windsor courtroom is now freed, and their charges are dropped as there is, and they all repeat this, every judge has said this, there is no possession law offense known unto law in Canada. So the government appealed that, and a Justice Stephen Rogan on May 16th on the Superior Court, an appeal court, in fact agreed with the lower court ruling and said, yes, there is no marijuana law in Canada, and hasn't been so for almost 2 years. And then it went to, and then that was binding on all the courtrooms in Ontario. So that's why since May 16th of this year, not a single person in Ontario has been charged with marijuana possession. Other courtrooms across Canada were also sympathetic to this, and in Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island, as well as a courtroom in St. John, New Brunswick, have all agreed there is no cannabis law that's binding or of effect in Canada, and that's for over 2 years now. In that period of time, by the way, over 20,000 people in Canada have been convicted in those 2 years of possession of cannabis, which is unlawful, which wasn't in the schedule at the time, and are wrong prosecutions and wrong convictions. And not only am I here to demonstrate that it's quite legal to possess marijuana right now, anywhere in Canada, but furthermore, the 20,000 plus convictions that have been experienced in Canada in that period of time are unlawful and must be revoked. Now currently, the Ontario Court of Appeal has heard the government's arguments in the last week about why this should be overturned. But the Court of Appeal said no, until we come back with another verdict later on this fall, it is in effect in Ontario. Any courtroom can use this, and in Canada, and all courtrooms in Ontario are bound by this new law, which is in fact that cannabis is not in the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. Now this is wonderful. Here we are in a legal environment, but nobody's willing to tell you, and it's a terrible missed opportunity, because in a legal environment for marijuana, everyone wins. We can license the grow rooms so that they're safe, so that they have a certified electrician to grow the marijuana. We can make sure through Agricultural Canada that no one is spraying poisons on the marijuana that comes for us in the marketplace. We can license outlets to sell marijuana and collect GST and PST. In a legal environment, you can regulate for safety. You can be brought into the greater family. There's a statue over there that says the family of man, and it was done as a centennial year project in 1967 for the city of Calgary. And that's what we really want. Marijuana people in Canada, 3 million of us, want to be considered in the greater Canadian family of man. All of us experience the running, the hiding. I mean, Reg, wherever you are here, you've been convicted 4 times of providing marijuana to the sick and ill. Grant Krieger, who should be here any moment, but he's been convicted endless number of times. And the rest of us all know what it's like to have to hide. Why? Because we have a lifestyle choice that believes in marijuana. We value it as, I mean, it was put here for a reason. In fact, the Charter of Rights says we recognize the supremacy of God. Well, who but God put this plant here? And if I can quote Genesis, Genesis says, take these these fruit-bearing seeds that I give you and plant them, and it's all good. The Bible does not delineate between these are bad, exterminate those, and these are good. The Bible says it is all good, and we in the Charter of Rights and Canadians recognize the supremacy of God. So it's important to realize that this plant has been here for 10,000 years, and we have been persecuted in Canada for 70 years. Over 1 million Canadians have a criminal record because of cannabis convictions. 1 million people have criminal records. Over 2 million Canadians have been arrested, detained, rousted, questioned, and regarding marijuana in the last 35 years, and half of those people were convicted, 1 million convictions. So we have had a terrible pogrom for over 35 years, where 35,000 to 50,000 Canadians every year have routinely been rounded up, jailed, detained, questioned, have lost their children in custody disputes, have been urine tested and lost jobs. If you're a young person with a conviction for marijuana, you will not be able to attend an American university. You will not be able to attend, see your family ever again in the United States. You won't be able to take a job that has transnational implications, Canadian companies doing business with the United States. You are subject to restrictions on your rights and your freedom for the rest of your life. And it's wrong. There's no reason our lifestyle should be punished. Now we have this beautiful legal environment. The city of Calgary could immediately say, well, marijuana is legal, we can regulate it. So all the homes where they're growing marijuana, where friends have set up the electrical supply system, we don't know whether they've got, you know, safety certification or not, that can all be rectified by the city just saying, as long as you get a safety certification license, you can grow marijuana in your home for yourself or for sale. Agriculture Canada supervises all the products and chemicals that are put on fruits that you consume and things that you put in your body. They can say no one can spray poisonous chemicals on fruiting marijuana for sale. And that protects us. That's what the government is supposed to do. The government is supposed to protect our freedom of choice, not restrict it. Do you know, I've never heard a justification in 35 years for this question. What is the moral basis by which we prosecute marijuana users? There is no moral basis. They surely can't say it's because it's harmful to society. Many, many things are terribly harmful to society that are greatly legal. Adultery is legal, spreading sexually transmitted diseases is legal, doing all sorts of crazy, dangerous stuff is legal in sports, in foods, in products that are harmful to you. That's not the basis of criminal law. The basis of criminal law is to protect us from force, fraud, and violence. And marijuana does not pose a threat at any level there, except when we make it illegal. When we have marijuana prohibition, we have organized crime seeking to supersede our right to our plant by making themselves the big business organization in charge of supplying us, instead of ourselves supplying ourselves with growing marijuana in our backyards and in our homes. And the government puts us in jail, eroding all our civil rights for no gain. Canada does not gain in any way by the criminalization of the cannabis culture. 3 million at this minimum have smoked or continue to smoke marijuana, and there is not a single justification for it. No good has ever come to Canada by putting any one of us in jail for marijuana. It costs the taxpayer money. It violates everyone's civil rights, because if they can put me in jail for a plant, they can put anyone in jail for a variety of plants. A precedent gets set whereby we can be punished for our lifestyle choices. Now, unfortunately, the next federal election, by the way, somebody let me know when it's getting close to 420. right? And anybody's welcome to join me. As I have explained, I do not believe I'm breaking any law. I am actually celebrating the freedom that was given to us by the courts under the Charter of Rights, which is the supreme document in Canada that navigates courts to determine what we are entitled to and what we are not entitled to. And we are all entitled right at this moment to legally possess marijuana and legally smoke it. And anywhere you would be able to carry tomatoes and lettuce. And as I was saying, actually I quite forgot and I haven't smoked yet, so I'm sure my memory will return after I've had that bong hit out of my bong there. And by the way, I need a drink, and I thank you all for coming. Woo! Thank you for coming. As I mentioned, this is the 8th province on my tour. I did not get arrested in Toronto, where the courts have recognized that there is no cannabis law. I did not get arrested in Halifax, where courts in Halifax have recognized there's no marijuana. And I did not get arrested in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, where the Prince Edward Island courts have also ruled. I did get arrested in St. John's, Newfoundland, in Moncton, New Brunswick, in Regina, Saskatchewan, and Winnipeg, Manitoba. And I'm hoping I don't get arrested here. It would be nice to think that the Calgary Police Department also acknowledges and recognizes that there is no cannabis law, and that we can proceed from this point forward to discuss, well, how will the future be? And I have seen the future, and it's beautiful. A legal environment is fabulous. All Canadians benefit by a legal environment. I remember what I was speaking about before, the moral justification for why we have been rounded up for 35 years. I have never heard anyone answer this question in Parliament. I have never had any one of the 301 parliamentarians get up and explain why marijuana should be continued to be illegal. And it's not a plant. After all, the plant doesn't suffer. The plant gets exterminated by the government and by police forces acting on government orders. But basically, it's the human beings that believe in marijuana that suffer. We're the ones that are put in jail. We're the ones that have our liberties deprived. We're the ones that have our future compromised. We're the ones that have our children out us in school, or our parents out us, depending on your relationship. What is the basis? Where do Canadians benefit by any of this going on? How have Canadians benefited by 1 million Canadians being criminalized? $2 billion a year is spent on the war on marijuana in Canada. Where is the benefit to that? Where is the proof that this money was wisely spent or usefully spent? How can we justify these continued expenditures? You know, I have a headline from the Globe and Mail from the summer of 1970. It says, marijuana to be decriminalized. And it was the Ledane Commission had delivered its interim report to the Trudeau government, and the Trudeau government said, we will decriminalize marijuana later on in the fall session. And 33 years later, 2 whole generations have come, and in some cases gone, and we are still no further ahead. And by the way, whether or not the police in Calgary accept that marijuana is legal according to law is not so important as to whether, when Parliament reconvenes, they attempt to recriminalize it. Now, they're calling their new proposals decriminalization. That is not true. It's legal right now, and if the government stopped appealing all these court decisions that they always lose, marijuana would be legal today for the entire country, and we could proceed from there. But the fact that the government is opposing this every step of the way, and that they are planning to introduce a new bill that will give us all more financial penalties for marijuana possession, that will make it a 14-year offense to grow over 50 plants. And I must tell you, there's over 75 to 95,000 grow operations in British Columbia. They employ 250,000 people, and every last one of us grows over 50 plants. Everybody grows 50 plants. You can have 50 plants in the corner of your bedroom. That's not even a large amount. So